So we've just had a pretty abrupt ending to our time filming here in Iran. Yesterday we were leaving the hotel when we were jumped on by 8 guys who told us they were with Iran's security forces. They took our phones, they pointed a gun in our heads, they took all our personal belongings, they took all our camera gear, they took all our footage. They then took us back to a hotel room where we've been for the last 18 hours or so. They have allowed us, or in fact they've told us to leave the country now with our phones only. They've kept our computers, they've kept everything else. It has been the most stressful 24 hours, and I honestly am so relieved to be getting out of here.
The Islamic Republic of Iran is no stranger to popular uprisings, but the demonstrations sweeping the country today are different.
Last September, 22-year-old Mahsa Amini was arrested by Iran's morality police. She was accused of violating the country's strict dress code and taken to a detention center where she was allegedly beaten. She died soon after. That sparked outrage, and months of mass protests erupted across Iran. Women burned their hijabs, cut their hair, and stormed the streets in rage. The regime responded with brute force, detaining tens of thousands, killing hundreds, and executing 7. Several dozen security officers were also killed in the clashes.
اونا برای تحریک ما به زن و بچه‌هایی که توی صف نونوایی بودن اومدن شلیک کردن.
ایران دستگاه قضایی ما بیقانونی داره بود.
1 week before our detention, we arrived in Iran. We're the first US TV crew to be here since the chaos first broke out. We are here in Iran. I can't quite believe it, but we have been given very rare visas to come and operate here by the Iranian regime. So we're just driving towards a neighborhood in Tehran that's been at the center of some of these protests over the last few months. This neighborhood has been a gathering point for young people rebelling against the system, including 5 girls who posted this viral video of themselves dancing, uncovered. They were later arrested. So you can see a bunch of these restaurants and cafes have been shut down recently by the authorities in a very clear, concerted effort to close down shops, cafes, restaurants, businesses that are allowing women who are not wearing hijabs to enter. So they're actually targeting the businesses themselves. But you can see despite that, a lot of women around here are still walking around completely uncovered in a very, very clear sign of defiance against the authorities' demands. Do you mind having a chat with us? Do you know what happened around here?
بله.
Can you tell me?
اولش گفتن که ساکنین شکایت دارن برای همچین اتفاقاتی و که مردم میان اینجا، ولی فکر می‌کنم این واقعی نیست.
Why is it you're worried about showing your face?
به خاطر که میتونه خطرناک باشه. سعی می‌کنیم که مراقبت زندگی کنیم. پس باید مواظب باشیم. قایم شدن تو اینجا خیلی بسه.
He was right. As soon as he started talking, the police arrived to stop us.
از وایس اومدی.
وایس
وایس from where? ها؟ وایس from where?
America. We've been here for 2 minutes and the police have already surrounded us. So the police have asked for us to leave this area because there's a protest that's about to start in a few minutes and they definitely do not want us seeing that. We were taken to the roadside and detained for several hours till night fell. You're deleting it? More police arrived. Are we not allowed to be here?
شما تمام از افراد ناراضی بودن رو میگید آقا مردم دولت ایران مخالف شادی مردم و لذت بردن مردم.
So we've finally been let go by the police after a couple of hours. They insisted on deleting some of our footage, and we're now just driving around the city because we've heard that there are protests happening, and it's a very strong police presence around the city right now. You can see a bunch of riot police on the corner. We think that we're being followed, so we can't actually get out of the car to see what's going on. Later that night, chants of protest came ringing out through Tehran. It quickly became apparent that our permissions to be here came with restrictions. We could only visit places pre-approved by Iran's media wing. Tehran's International Book Fair was deemed uncontroversial enough for us to attend. But as soon as we arrived, we were told by a passing stranger that all the books that they and we saw must now be government approved. We're choosing not to show his face.
You know, the current situation is so terrible right now.
Has the type of books that are being sold here and being showcased here changed?
Yeah, of course.
In what way?
The way that some publishers are not allowed to exhibit their books here
Why is that?
because of political measures. They've been limited.
One of the conditions of people coming here is that women are dressed correctly. So this here, right at the entrance of the event, is the Center for Advising Women on how to wear the hijab and what could go wrong if you don't. What is your role here?
We are speaking about their questions, about why we have this. If we are Muslim, why should we have this? If they are somebody who are not Muslim, why they should have this? I am here to speak with the teenagers, with the young people, to tell to them, think about my speaking, think about what I say to you.
So you're trying to influence them?
Yes. And now the media, those media who don't want our country, don't want our istiqlal, say and tell about your woman shouldn't have this. This is not freedom.
So you think that it's Western media that is influencing women here?
Of course it is, you know.
It's nothing to do with the fact that some women might choose not to wear a headscarf?
Very little. Some women, you know, Iranian people, the problem of Iranian people is not Islam. But the media don't want Islam, you know. Your problem is this scarf. No. Amma Islamic revolution, because we love Islam, and Islam is whatever God say to us, not whatever I want, you want, whatever you want, whatever she wants, whatever, you know.
So there shouldn't be that personal freedom of choice.
Yes, choice in the limit of Islam, whatever God lets us.
Right. What is it that you came here for today?
منم که جواب سوالامو بدونم. حتی خودم الان با وضعیت حال کشورم خیلی موافق نیستم، ولی اومدم که صحبت کنم که
And do you feel convinced by the conversation that you've been having today?
Yes.
Will you change your behaviors or what you wear at all?
I don't want to change her behavior. I want her to think.
Yeah.
اصلا این اعتراضات برای پننمایی به انتقاد من اینا نبود. خاطر این بود که جون یک نفر مقاطع حجاب گرفته حجاب جونشو از دست میده، خیلی ناراحت کننده است. خب ممنون، دست شما درد نکنه.
You're going to stop us?
Yes.
Why?
قرار بود کم باشه که بتونیم دیگه 5 دقیقه دیگه 5 minutes، اوکی؟ ولی الان تقریبا نزدیک 20 دقیقه است داریم گفتگو.
It was just getting interesting.
خب باشه، بالاخره حالا ما
We are Iranian, all of Iranian are interesting, you know?
Yeah, this is a very interesting conversation. But more and more Iranians are resisting. Throughout our time here, a handful of young, brave individuals decided to talk to us. We're hiding their identities. They told us about the security forces' harsh crackdowns, which have since expanded to schools and universities.
When it was protest, they don't let us go to the classes without scarf. They fired a lot of our friends. They fired them from doormats. They don't have anywhere to sleep.
Everything is a crime. Doesn't matter what it is. You can drink, you can shake hands with girls, you can't do anything.
Students told us they were forced to sign a pledge, saying that they would adhere to the dress code, that they wouldn't sit next to those of the opposite sex, and that they wouldn't protest.
Signing a pledge is not losing anything. It's just that we can't defeat them right now. I think our generation is gonna overcome the system eventually. Just not right now.
Violence, they told us, had been used to silence them. One teenager told me how security forces had opened fire on her.
We were at the park and they just shoot at us without no reason. We were just sitting, we didn't do anything.
Were you badly hit?
Yeah, it's really hard. I think I'm in danger.
She showed me several rubber bullet wounds scattered across her body. The next day, we left the capital and travelled to Qom to try and get a taste for how the religious sects of the country felt.
This is a very different side to what we've been seeing online recently. All these people have come to the city of Qom, which is one of the holiest cities in Iran, to come show their respect for their religion. This is where a lot of the clerical establishment are based, and these clerics here have a huge amount of influence, a huge amount of power within the Iranian regime. So if any change happens, it's very likely to start right here.
Much of the country's public anger over the last year is directed towards the all-powerful clerical establishment, who sat in power for over 4 decades, since the Islamic Revolution. This anger reached a boiling point last year when religious clerics were attacked, their turbans tossed from their heads, in a sign of resentment towards the theocratic system that rules over the Iranian people.
These recent protests demanding changes have led to a brutal crackdown. There's been tens of thousands of people who have been arrested. There's been hundreds of people who have been killed. Hundreds more have been beaten, been tortured. Do you not think that if clerics like yourself condemned that kind of behavior from this regime, that would make a big impact on society?
خیلی اغراق میکنه. البته مثل غرب همیشه دوست داره اغراق کنه.
These are figures that come from the UN, these are figures that come from outside monitoring groups, these are figures that come from human rights organizations.
سازمان ملل زیر نظر کی داره کار میکنه؟ آمریکا.
So you don't think that there's been any violence towards protesters?
بریزن مردم را بکشن، مردم را با چاقو تکه تکه کنن. اگر یکی از این کارا توی یکی از کشورهای غربی اتفاق افتاده بود، پلیس اونجا چه کار میکنه؟
It sounds like you stand 100% by the regime, by the government. It sounds like you don't really want anything to change.
نارضایتی مردم از اقتصاد هست. همه اینا را من قبول دارم. ولی آیا اگر پلیس اومد از خودش دفاع کرد، آیا ما باید این را به خشونت بنامیم؟
But not all clerics are aligned. We met up with Mohammed Taghi Fazel Mebodi, a self-proclaimed reformist cleric who challenges the current government by questioning their legitimacy.
You know, I wasn't expecting a religious cleric in Iran to let me ride around with you and let you be seen without any of your clothing on.
ممکن بود خیلی‌ها قبول نکنم ولی من آزادم. من اینا رو
So when you drive around town, you normally don't wear your clerical clothing?
نه.
Are there more and more clerics recently taking their clothes off given the amount of backlash and the amount of anger towards you guys?
معمولا کمتر با لباس روحانیت میان بیرون الان. کمتر. نمی‌پوشیدم ولی الان به خاطر اعتراضاتی که داره صورت میگیره نسبت به روحانیت احتیاط میکنن و کمتر میپوشن.
I mean, obviously you get to choose whether you put on or take off your clerical clothing, right? Women don't get to choose. In fact, a lot of women are very angry that it's clerics like yourself who are dictating what women should and shouldn't wear. Why is that?
من شخصاً با این که زن رو به حجاب مجبور کنم موافق نیستم و کمتر و اقلی از روحانیت این نظر رو دارن، نه اکثر. حجاب یه امر اخلاقیه و امر اخلاقی هم الزامی و تعهدی نباید باشه. یه خانمی که با از ترس حجاب داشته باشه این حجاب ارزشی نداره.
Some of the protesters have called for an end to the clerical establishment, which is you guys, right? How does that make you feel?
بله در سری اومدن گفتن که ما با حکومت مذهبی موافق نیستیم، اونا هم حق دارن. ولی این که بگیم خواسته اکثر ملت هست هنوز من به اون نتیجه نرسیدم. من شخصا خودم با حکومت مذهبی به معنایی که الان در ایران هست شخصا موافق نیستم، نظر مخالف دارم و روحانیت هم به نظر بنده اونم در اثر این که موفق نبوده کارشو درست انجام بده مردم ناراضی شدن. از طریق اعتراضات خیابانی و با روش خشن خواسته باشید نظامی رو عوض بکنید، اونم بدونی که همه مردم همراهی بکنن، به نظر من نتیجه مثبتی نداره. نسل جوان امروز میخواد انقلاب کنه، صبح رژیم عوض بشه، جاش رژیم دیگری بیاد. ولی این سوال باید پاسخ بده که حالا اگر رژیم دیگری آمد کی میخواد بیاد و چه کار میخواد بکنه؟ با چه مانیفستی؟
The cleric says he supports reforms, which shows a division of opinions within the religious elite. But he ultimately warns against a complete overhaul of the current system. So these young kids here who are about to perform have been trained by the guy in the white shirt who's a member of the Besiege, which is part of the security apparatus. They have been extremely involved in the brutal crackdown of protesters, and part of their mission is to train young kids to get to know Islam, to get to know how to operate in Iran, in the hopes that this country can continue in the vein that it's going today.
اینا خداییش باید تشویقشون نکرد. ماشاءالله ماشاءالله.
What does it mean to be a Basiji?
امام خمینی فرمود بسیج لشکر مخلص خداست.
How do you recruit all these kids?
بچه‌ها از طریق مدرسه و مسجد اون طریق با اونها در زمینه سرود کار می‌کردیم.
Is the hope that these guys grow up to become Basijis?
بله قطعا همینطوره و این بچه‌ها با ذوق و شوق اومدن، با میل باطنی اومدن. توفیق خدمتگزاری این بچه‌ها رو ما داریم، انشالله همینطور باشه در آینده.
Do any of you guys plan to be members of the Basiji when you grow up?
دوست داری بسیجی بشی؟ بلند.
خیلی دوست دارم. منم دوست دارم. منم.
Why?
چرا دوست؟
چون میتونیم به مردم کشورمون کمک کنیم.
These eager young voices show how the Islamic Republic influences the next generation. But to do that successfully, any criticism of the regime must be silenced. Since the latest uprising, around 100 journalists have been arrested. Those who broke the news about Mahsa Amini's death were sentenced to 12 and 13 years in prison. Yalda Mauri is a photojournalist who's been arrested at least 6 times. So when was this photo taken?
16 years ago. It was at the first days that Gashte Irshad started to work. They wanted to put this woman to police station to talk with them or sign a paper or something, but these women were very scary about it.
So these are 2 women being arrested for not wearing their headscarves properly?
Yeah. This is another one. This woman is a police officer.
What is she taking them in for?
For hijab. For bad, wearing and these things.
So for improper clothing. I recognize this photo. I've seen it around. When was this photo taken?
5 years ago.
And what was happening here?
It was a demonstration in Tehran University. This is inside the university. And she's a protester Yeah, this has changed my life forever.
So this photo that was taken years ago is still causing you problems today?
Yeah, a lot of. They have problems with the journalistic issues. They have problems with everything that you want to inform people. They are against all of this.
Mm-hmm.
They are against media. They are, against people know their reality. They are against the reality.
So these are the documents that you have from your court cases?
بله اینا مدارکیه که در واقع در طول این سالها این در واقع همون حکمیه که مربوط به اون عکس منه که در واقع منجر به 2 سال زندان و کل حکم مدت 5 سال تعلیق شده.
So the case is open?
Yeah, the case is open.
And it
5 years.
It's not going to be closed for another 5 years?
No.
So you're under watch, basically?
Yeah. This is exactly what they wanted.
What was your crime?
Taking picture.
Just taking photos?
Yeah. But, what they wrote on the paper was اجتماع و تبانی علیه امنیت کشور اغتشاش.
And how long did you spend in prison this time around?
92 days. 60 days in public prison and 32 days in solitary.
Solitary confinement?
Yeah.
How was that?
It was very tough. You would think that you are really going to be mad.
Yeah.
There is nothing there. Nobody's there.
What kind of thoughts were you having?
It was like a hell. I really wanted to kill myself.
Do you think there will be consequences for you in talking to us?
آره انجام مصاحبه ممکنه که بله تبعاتی داشته باشه. ممکنه من احضار بشم و سوال جواب بشم یا منم قطعا میترسم. من در تمام زندگیم سعی کردم که کاری که درسته رو انجام بدم و هر وقت که بتونم یک در واقع نوری به یک تاریکی بتابونم من این کار رو انجام میدم به هر روشی.
Yelda may put on a brave face, but the system she's up against is a well-oiled machine. We requested multiple interviews with senior members of President Ibrahim Raisi's government. Eventually, we were granted a meeting with one of his vice presidents. As the only female member of the current government, Ensia Khazali is the Minister of Women's Affairs. There are pretty strict laws in place, including the hijab law. Why is that necessary? Why can't women have that freedom of choice?
انتخاب فکرشون و عقیدهشون آزاد هستن. ولی در انتخاب بنابراین این یک قانونه نه یک اجبار دینی یا اجبار عقیدتی.
Mahsa Amini, who's a 22-year-old woman who was taken in by the morality police for having too much of her hair showing and later died in police custody, was killed by the authorities. Is that not something that you admit?
نه، دقیقاً از همین مورد میخوام بگم که ایشون کشته نشد. مهسا امینی جز مواردی بود که به دلیل تذکر پوشش حجاب در کلاس‌های هدایت شد به کلاس‌های یک کلاس آموزشی بود. و ایشون در اون شرایط تو کلاس فیلمش هم موجود هست که در هیچ کدوم کشته نشدن. ایشون به دلیل بیماری زمینه‌ای که داشت که از بچگی این بیماری رو داشت در اونجا حالش بد شد.
After mounting pressure, the authorities released a clipped CCTV video showing Mahsa Amini collapsing in the detention center. Proof, they say, that she died from a heart attack. But Amini's family say she had no pre-existing heart conditions, and witnesses reportedly saw her being badly beaten just before this. The only investigation to have come out of this was done by the authority themselves, which is, essentially like a murderer investigating themselves.
شما به علم پزشکی اعتقاد دارید؟
Yes.
یعنی نتایجی رو که پزشکان تایید بکنن شما قبول میکنید؟
I think that the problem is that the only people who have actually done any investigation is yourself.
قضاوت شما قضاوت منطقی نیست. بگید بهشون قضاوت شما منطقی نیست. من دارم علمی صحبت میکنم. خود ما انجام ندادیم. پزشکانی انجام دادن که اون پزشکان دولتی نبودند.
Isn't it hypocritical of you that you claim to be representing women's rights and yet your role is really part of this repression against them?
چه درصدی هستن این زنها؟
Well, it's very difficult to know because this is not a democracy and therefore the figures are extremely hard to know. But I would say that this seems like the biggest challenge or one of the biggest challenges to the Islamic regime in the last few decades.
من به این صحبت شما واقعا اعتراض دارم. ابدا این گونه نیست که دموکراتیک نباشه اینجا. از خیلی از کشورهایی که شما میشناسید دموکراتیک تره.
I know that you know that the scale of what's happened here is enormous. It is one of the biggest challenges to the Islamic Republic over the last few decades. Does it not make you think for a moment that, maybe some of your ideas could be outdated and that there are, a lot of young people in Iran who do want to see change?
خیلی راحت انتقاد رو میپذیریم و اگر بعضی از دیدگاه‌هامون قدیمی باشه تجدید نظر میکنیم. اما اگر راجع به حجاب میگید ما حجاب رو یک جور مسئولیت میدونیم. ما حجاب رو یک جور حفاظت در مقابل خشونت میدونیم. خیلی از این حریم هایی که ما داریم برای حفاظت از زن هست و اگر بفهمیم روزی که بعضی از اینها ممکنه به زن صدمه بزنه قطعاً درش تجدید نظر میکنیم.
In response to these protests, there has been a brutal, widespread crackdown that's been pretty relentless. There's been tens of thousands of protesters arrested, according to the state figures. There's also been hundreds that have been beaten and tortured, hundreds more who have been killed. There's reports of sexual assault within the prisons themselves. Several protesters have been executed, several more are sitting on death row. Why? Why such a brutal crackdown?
من خیلی متاسفم که مسائل دروغی رو شما دارین مطرح میکنید. متاسفم که شما تحت تاثیر این رسانه ها قرار گرفتید. حتما ازتون دعوت میکنم بمونید تا با وقایع و حقیقت های ایران بیشتر آشنا بشید.
Okay, it seems like we're talking from polar opposite realities, I guess. This is one of the hardest places I've ever worked as a journalist. We are followed everywhere. The police stop us from talking to anyone. A lot of other people are terrified to speak with us, as they rightly should be. Why are you making it so difficult for journalists to report the truth?
و همین که شما الان تونستید با افرادی صحبت کنید که حرف‌هایی زدن که مخالف حکومت بوده، دلیل بر این هست که جو امنیتی غالب نیست.
Just one day after our conversation with the Vice President was when we found our van suddenly surrounded by a team of Iran's security forces. A gun was held to our head and everything was taken from us. Later that night, while in detention, they told us they suspected we were working under false pretenses. The next day, we were instructed to leave the country. It was an abrupt end to our time in Iran. A stark reminder that freedom and truth are so far from reach here, and that the regime's power and vulnerability lies in their ability to silence voices, most disturbingly of their own people. Since we left the country, Iran's parliament has passed a new hijab bill, where those dressed inappropriately now face up to 10 years in prison. Iran's infamous morality police are reportedly back on the streets. Just recently, 16-year-old Armita Geravand died from the same afflictions as Mahsa Amini just 1 year later.